Hey everyone, MimiVix here with a lore video that is a little different from what I usually have been doing. Dawn Trail's story introduced Sphene and her kingdom of Alexandria, and I nearly lost it. Final Fantasy IX is one of my favorites in the franchise, and if you enjoy turn-based RPGs, I definitely recommend that you give it a try. That said, when Sphene approached and that familiar score started, it started to sink in. If this is the Alexandria, what happened to it? How did we get to this point? A world shrouded in heavy clouds, plagued with merciless Levin strikes. In order to discover how and why, we need to go back in time, back before the events of even Final Fantasy IX's gameplay. All the way back to Terra. Terra was a world all of its own. Its people, a race of beings recognized by their prehensile tails, were intelligent, and through this existence they managed to advance their technology to impressive heights. However, no amount of technology could prepare them for the discovery that their world's crystal was dying. To better explain this, we have to look at what I have been calling the Final Fantasy crystal theory. It is simply that every star has a mother crystal. This crystal rests amidst the ethereal sea, and as beings die, their life energy travels through the ethereal sea into the crystal, where it is purified and then returned to the world in a cycle of rebirth. This cycle is how the planet supports life, and as time progresses, the crystals weaken and the cycle will stop, resulting in a cataclysm that will end the world. The Terrans, now facing the destruction of their world, turned to technology in order to find a solution. They located a young star, Gaia, that had a strong crystal and decided to take a massive risk. They would attempt to assimilate the planet by fusing their world's crystal with the Gaian crystal. To ensure safety, the Terrans made Garland, an android-like genome, and put themselves in a bodiless stasis where their souls would be stored away and given new forms once their home was secured. Garland attempted the plan, but it failed. The Gaian crystal rejected the fusion. The surface of Gaia was left in ruins, and Terra was shifted inside of Gaia, leaving only the red moon looming among the stars. Garland did not let this failure deter him. He transplanted the Yifa tree onto Gaia's surface in order to siphon souls away from the crystal to allow him to take it over. Through the mist expelled by the tree from the souls that it took, many centuries of war broke out across the world, most prominently between the Kingdom of Alexandria and Lindblum. The mist warped the minds of those exposed to it, leaving the people vulnerable to manipulation and thus exploitation in order to expedite Garland's plan to wipe out the Gaians. As he felt things were starting to come together, he discovered a small settlement on the outer continent comprised of channelers. Fearing their power, he had the settlement all but wiped off the planet. However, surviving children that managed to escape would end up ultimately creating problems. One of these children became a member of the Alexandrian royal family, which grants our first link to how our cataclysm began. Garnet till Alexandros XVII would be plagued by nightmares and oblivious to her connections to the Evokers. The Queen removed her horn, which also removed her ability to communicate with the Eidolons, and when Garnet turned 16, she had the Eidolons within Garnet's body removed, crystallized, to allow her to use them in her war against the world as she attempted to take it over, not realizing that she was being used as a puppet. Even this did not stop Rama, the crystal's guardian Eidolon, from appearing before her and offering aid. This is important as it shows the crystal bore an affinity to Levin Aether. As events continue in the game, Garnet works with Aiko, another evoker, to call forth Alexander, and we bear witness to the blade on the castle shattering. Garnet becomes the Queen of Alexandria and rules over a predominantly peaceful section of history on Gaia, with Lindblom being a peaceful partner. We can only assume that this peace lasted for several centuries, possibly even millennia, as we do not have any sort of timeline gaps to show us anything between Final Fantasy IX's ending and Final Fantasy XIV's history. While several people will likely discredit it, I feel that Queen Eternal was genuine, rather than being an unreliable narrator. That said, the information that we do have is that Gaia did continue to prosper for quite some time, allowing the inhabitants to advance their technology and thrive. Unfortunately, the signs began to show that something was wrong with the crystal, but the signs went unnoticed. Or, due to the loss of the evokers, the channelers, they lost the ability to hear the cries. Thunderstorms began to ravage, some stronger than previous, and one of them destroyed a forest not far from Alexandria. A team was sent to assess the damage, and they discovered a strange ore. This ore became known as Electrope. Research began immediately, and it was discovered to hold the ability to change Levin Aether into almost any other aspected ethereal form. Word spread, and war soon broke out over the control of this miracle ore. The young Princess Sphene bore witness to this chaos and took up magical studies in order to help her people. But when her parents were taken away from her by the war, she was forced to quit her studies and forced into the role as queen at a young age. An organization was made to specialize in the use and implication of Electrope. Their goal was to lead humanity to the next steps of its evolution, no matter the cost. This group, led by a man named Calyx, was called Preservation, as a means to show their intentions to preserve life. A fine goal, but their tactics would prove to be far darker. The war was relentless, and the storms were not getting any weaker. The kingdom and its people relied heavily on Queen Sphene as a pillar, and the weight of that responsibility did not help Sphene's mental state, but she persevered. Their happiness is my happiness. Everything would change, and not for the better, when Lindblom revealed a new weapon, a super weapon powered by lightning aether that they aimed at Alexandria. With no warning and no fanfare, Lindblom loosed the weapon, which hypercharged the ethereal sea and created a cataclysm that shattered the world as they knew it. The sky tore open. Levin rained from the sky across the world. Lindblom fell. Alexandrians raced through the streets as homes began to burst from Levin bolts. The knights took to the streets to aid in the rescue. Some took to the air in ships, including Sphene, to pull as many citizens out of the storm and to the castle for refuge as they could. Many lost their lives. Sphene seemed fine, the bravery of the knights and the guard appearing to have shielded her. Preservation managed to erect a dome around the city to protect them from the endless Levin storm, while they planned a means of survival. But then Sphene fell ill. We know that she had been afflicted with Levin sickness, a disease that is caused by excess exposure to Levin aether. This includes the dome protecting the people, as well as the storms. We know that it attacks the nervous system, making basic body functions difficult, and we also know there is currently no cure. I will get back to that in a minute. But Sphene fell ill, and everyone in the kingdom began to lose hope. Seeing no cure for Levin's sickness, Calix came up with a solution. They would put Sphene in a special chamber in an induced coma and place her in stasis that would keep her both from aging as well as sustain her while preservation continued their research. This was successful, but the people, unable to see their queen, began to cause unrest amongst the inhabitants of Alexandria. Calix needed a way to both have Sphene in stasis as well as have her around to ease the people's concerns. He found Electrope was susceptible to making projections and could even house memories. Using this information, he began creating androids and experimenting. In order to do this, he needed volunteers. Hopeful that the new technology would propel Sphene back to the arms of the people, Otis stepped forward and volunteered his own soul to be used in the experiment of creating Endless. Otis was told the research was to bring Sphene back to the people, which he did not hesitate to agree to. Zelenia, his second in command, stayed behind to continue acting as guard. Calix saved Otis's memories onto what he called the Cloud, but installed his actual soul within a prototype of the guard automatons that he had been creating. This made it impossible to re-upload Otis should anything happen to his mechanical form, and was not a favorable outcome for Calix in his search for expanding human evolution onto its next form. At least it was a step in the direction. But with further work, he did manage to create a true Endless and spread the word that Sphene was back, which revitalized hope amongst the people of Alexandria, and also began the true calling for preservation's activities. The now Endless Sphene would rule over Alexandria for 370 years before a crisis became known. Endless and the Cloud require large amounts of aether and souls to maintain. If the Cloud falters, Sphene would lose her people, and the personality warped by Sphene's mental state prior to becoming an Endless shifted her moral compass. She would do anything to preserve her people, any cost. It would not matter as long as her people were happy and alive. A portal was torn into their world where she would then meet Zoralja, who would promise her all of the souls she could ever need in exchange for power. And this was a deal she accepted. This is where us as the Warrior of Light begin our true participation in the exploration of Alexandria. We assisted in the creation and repair of the train and helped the people of Shaluani. We watched the train leave. Everybody was in high spirits, high hopes for the future of Tural and the Turali train station, only for a dome to appear, shattering the sky and encompassing Yasulani right before your very eyes. From the dome, several large ships emerge, cutting through the air, making a line straight for Tuliholal. Wuklamat, in a panic, goes after them, fearing for the safety of her people. And we, as the Warrior of Light, follow suit. Now, I will not do a full timeline here, but I did want to touch on some things that I skipped over and explain why. So we learned that Kryl originated from the Ninth Reflection, and that her parents worked with preservation as researchers. I did not bring this up because of time dilation. We have seen that time moves differently on different reflections, and that time tends to regulate as soon as a stable connection with another reflection has been made. So what we know is that from the flash and the appearance of the dome, that it was 120 seconds that passed. Story, we are told 30 years passed inside the dome from its appearance. That means 7 years passed for every real life second that happened. For us, not in game, for us. So if 30 years passed in the dome from when it appeared, that is where the 370-year gap from Sphene falling ill to the endless Sphene meeting Zoraalja takes place, which gives us a 400-year gap for Sphene being in stasis. We know Kryl is canonically 22. We also know that the expedition to Tural that Baldesion took was 20 years ago, which implies that Kryl was close to the age of 2. And now you see the dilemma with the time dilation. Kryl's existence actively makes this impossible for me to do the math for. It's hurting my brain. Now, back to the topic at hand. What all of this ends up running into is that Calyx and preservation are genuinely the threats to society as a whole, seeing sacrifice as a means to an end, and that the future of humanity does not need to rely upon a corporeal vessel so long as they have a means to transfer their soul from one being to another. This calls all the way back to the beginning of this with Terrans and their means of extracting their souls, putting their souls into stasis, and creating genomes to house their souls, and thus continue their existence anew. With that said, I feel that we need to look back to Final Fantasy IX in order to see potentially where the future of Dawntrail is going to go. And I don't think people need to sleep on Final Fantasy IX any further, but that's a rant for another day. This video has gone on for an extensive amount of time. I certainly hope that you enjoyed it. If you would like to leave a comment, share your opinions, your views, your theories, I will happily read them. If you would like a full timeline of Final Fantasy IX, let me know. Until next time, have a great rest of your day, and I will catch you guys in the next video.